want to stop this.
No, we can end it.
We'll just leave it. Alright, cool. We'll just leave it.
City's breaking down on a camel's back. They just have to go.
Hello, you're listening to The Patient Approach with Milo, me, Oggy and Moose. On today's episode of The Patient Approach, we will be discussing how the news is delivered, the positive and negative aspects of its current state, and how it might change in the future.
Hello, you're listening to The Patient Approach. You're listening to Milo speaking. We've also got Moose and Oggy with us as well. Do you want to say hi, guys?
Good afternoon.
Hello.
Brilliant. So this is our second proper episode. Technically 3 in total, but this is our second proper episode. And we are going to be talking about the news today. So hopefully we're going to discuss whether we watch the news, whether we trust it, what our thoughts are about that. Moose came with some newspapers today. Me and Oggy were dumbfounded. He prepared for this one.
It's basically my way of pretending I did some research.
Yeah. The biggest problem with it is I don't think any of us watch the news, but now that's not believable because we've got newspapers in the room.
Oh, damn. All right. I'm not watching the news. I'm reading.
Oh, reading. He's
changing the game.
He's sharp today.
He's
sharp today. He's got his hooves ready to go. All right then. So, first thing I'm going to ask then is, do you guys actually watch the news?
I don't. I remember when I was a kid, my nan always telling me, "You need to watch the news. You need to watch the news." Every time she came over, it was at 6 o'clock. Instead of watching The Simpsons, it was let's turn the news on. I didn't give a fuck then. Don't give a fuck now. If I'm honest.
Yeah, it's weird, isn't it? It's. I don't. See, this is the thing. I don't think there is that. There's almost that expectation that you should pay attention to the news, that you should watch the news. Yeah. But I don't think people even care as much, like, because you said it's your nan telling you, didn't you?
Yeah. And
I would have felt like, my late granddad would have been on that as well. But I don't feel like. I don't know. Do you feel like your parents ever mentioned?
You're not going to die if you don't watch the news.
And like, whereas I think once upon a time that was the case. You had to watch the news. You had to be on top of it. Like people expect you to know certain things, but people don't expect you to necessarily watch the news, do they? Like, do you? Yeah, go on.
It sort of depends on the time you're living in. I'm guessing because if you were living in World War II, you'd be you'd be listening to everything that's coming out of the news.
Yeah.
Whereas if you're living in a time of peace and quiet suburban life, you may not really be that interested in the news.
And even further than that, like we've got so much information available to us now. We can see the news anytime just by logging onto Facebook or
exactly.
But even then, I don't really pay attention to it. And
why not, man? Why don't you? If you've got access to the news, you've got access to international affairs. The most important things happening today, and you're not watching it. What makes you so special? What makes your life so amazing that the news isn't exciting? Yeah. I mean, I'm saying this provocatively. I don't watch the news.
Do you watch the news?
I don't watch it either. I'm just curious about.
No, I watch the news. I watch the news every now and then.
And what can you take from the news when you watch it?
I'd like to think that I watch it purely for informational consumption, and with regards to that, I think it's satisfactory.
It sounds like an Amazon review.
Three stars.
I'll give the news 3 stars. Will not purchase from this seller again.
Do you trust the news?
Do I trust the news? Well, it sort of depends on what I'm reading, really. If it's political or if it's purely, scientific or relating to health. If it's political or relating to social problems, I'm sort of less. I'm a lot more sceptical,
Right.
And I'm less inclined to take sides.
Well, quite interestingly, I watched a 1960s educational film on press, journalism and news. It was something like 20 minutes long.
Okay.
And so they
He's done his research.
that the success of newspapers, so this is about newspapers because it was in the 1960s, depends on integrity, honesty, service in the good cause of good government. Service in the cause of good government, and skilled craftsmen and devoted reporters. Do you think the news exemplifies that now?
I think this is the thing. It's probably not, but then again, I don't. It's weird because the news is there's two sides to the news, right? There's what was written down in those kind of several points of there's a group of people who believe that knowledge is important and that people have a right to know about these things and that it's their job to share that with people. That's one side of news. Then there's the other side of news where news is just a collective term for a bunch of organisations that all have a bottom line that they've got to meet. And there's the idea of the news, and then there's the actual reality of news as a business. People turning up for their 9 to 5, they need to get paid, they've got family, they've got whatever, and they need to come home and do that. And I think in today's world, I think to be honest, people who predominantly think like that and care about integrity and do this, that and the other, I think them, I'd almost distance them from what the news is in general.
Well, going on that point, I've got the Sun newspaper here, which if our many listeners did not know, is one of the sensationalists' newspapers, but tabloids. Also sells the tabloids, but it also sells an incredible amount. And you just look at the front page of it, and just in bold letters, "Cowardly cover up," sort of picture of a policeman and the law of Britain, and then "Rape lie, peer hounded to his death," and emphasis on the word rape when in a normal sentence that emphasis did not make sense to me.
Yeah.
Just the attracting of attention and.
Oh yeah, no doubt. Yeah.
To read a newspaper and going on that point where it's become a business. And like one thing that I think was quite interesting was shall I name drop this because I sound quite pretentious at the moment, don't I? But from Professor Mitchell Stevens at the New York University. Working. Where is it? Sorry.
When was he born?
Journalism and mass.
What's his favourite film?
Favourite film is Duck Soup. I don't know what it is, but he explained that the news has always been around. You know, I always think of the news as what I see on TV or what I read in the newspapers or whatever. Yeah. But the news has been going on centuries where people will tell other people's tribes to pass them on information about of tribes or whatever, and that's how it grew. It was in the 1800s that people realised that it can turn into a business.
Right. That's interesting. I guess there's a distinction in there between the news as sharing relevant information to you, and mass media. That means we can share more information with more people, make money from it, and make sure people are making a living out of it. And I don't know. I guess it's. I just think in today's world we're at a situation where you've got so much information. We've got the Sun, we've got the Daily Telegraph that Moose has brought in here, and there's so much information in both of those two magazines, and that's just two newspapers. There's so much information in both of those about so many things going on in the world, and that's not even factoring in the internet.
I think the amazing thing is nowadays we get to choose what information we want to consume and what we don't. And I think this is probably the reason why the news, I think, is declining as a concept and declining in importance from sort of like the 1940s and so on. Just because now we can choose what we want to read on our phones and what we want to consume, whether it's whether somebody wants to read a news outlet that's more about entertainment, or sports, or somebody who's purely political. The point is we now have the choice. And that is surely possibly changing our impression, our concept of what the news is.
Why do you think people read the entertainment section of the newspaper? So that's one section that I've always skipped past. I've never understood it. It's the who's going out with who.
I think it nicely ties back into our previous episode on inspiration, which you should go and watch. You should go and watch if you don't want to be out of the loop. It's all connected. But what I was going to say is that there's a link in my voice. If you listen, it will take you to the what we spoke a lot of time talking about is how celebrities have kind of replaced traditional inspirational figures in today's world, and it's to do with the bar being lowered and making them more accessible as figures of inspiration. But as a consequence of that, it takes less for you to be considered a worthwhile, important human being. And I think the reason why people tap into the entertainment section, tap into these things, and the reason why they increasingly become popular is related to that. It's because, you know, there's only so many times you can hear about there's a new, like, you know, our parents' generation would have lived most of their lives with the knowledge in the back of their heads that a nuclear war could happen.
Oh yeah.
It's kind of hard to calm down. It's kind of, once you've lived through that and you've experienced that, on a psychological level, anything else has got to be slightly disinteresting, hasn't it? So you know, what we were talking about just before the podcast is Boko Haram. Is that, I'm not sure if I pronounced the name correct.
That's right. Yeah.
ISIS, a lot of these other groups. Whilst they're on one level scary and there's a sense of hysteria about that, on another level, it's kind of boring almost. It's kind of what you'd expect from the world we live in. You know, our parents have grown, as I said, grown up with the knowledge of, you know, our grandparents grew up with all the one of the most devastating wars in human history. Parents have lived with very real threat that the world was going to be destroyed, and I think
the whole communism.
You know, it's very crazy. Everyday people being aware of huge issues that they can't impact, and it's almost like our current influx of kind of like celebrity news and entertainment news. It's maybe almost even a response to that, because in some ways it's more interesting. You know, it's more, in some ways, you know, being told that this is going to destroy you and this is going to kill you and the world is going to implode every day for the last 15 years is eventually going to stop becoming serious. It's going to stop becoming real, because you know, you've got to think, if you generally believed that ISIS was a threat to us, would you not join the army? Would you not enlist? Would you not fight? If you genuinely believe that you would stop getting the train. You would not do, like, there's a sense of hysteria about what you will engage in, and that's the activity and that's the fun and that's what we get wrapped up in. But we don't care about that as much as we care about what Kim Kardashian's wearing. And I think the reason why is because for years the news has been built on this increasing level of the world is going to end, everything's terrible, everything's this. Because I don't believe it's a conspiracy. I think people probably did believe that was going to happen, but what we've got now is people are no longer interested in that. You know, people, you know, it comes in fashion. Hysteria comes and goes, but now people are more interested in celebrities.
Are you saying now that the news doesn't sort of affect us the way it did, and that we're a lot more desensitized? Perhaps.
Yeah. That is definitely what I'm saying.
I would agree with that. I would agree. And
another side to that is something more recent. Something that Alan de Botton, I think I'll go into a bit more in detail.
Yeah, go for it.
And he said there are 5 issues with the news. One of the things that he said is, who cares? And it's not like all this loss of jobs, the terror, you know, the immigrants, all that sort of stuff. In our heads, we don't actually care. And he said a lot of that is because of empathy. We're parachuted, in his words, we're parachuted into this situation where, you know, this disaster has happened, but we don't know these people. We don't know these people to care.
True,
It's just you just see. We might see a video of someone crying. It's like, you know, our human emotions are like, he's upset, so I should be upset, but I don't know that person.
True.
I think I've got an interesting real life like experience that kind of ties into that, and I don't know if you guys would have seen it, but around where I live, sort of in a few areas near me as well, I've seen posters of this guy who's gone missing. This older guy.
No, I've not come across it.
I've just seen it everywhere near where I live. He's an old guy who's gone missing. He says the areas he goes around, it's been put out by police, presumably by loved ones, and people are trying to find where he is. That I haven't seen anything about that in the news.
Really?
And it's almost like, it's almost bizarre, because it's, what would it take for that to be a story on the news? Like, I'm seeing this everywhere.
True,
and it's like, does that poster count as the news? You know what I mean? Does that poster not? Does it or does it not? And it's almost like that would seem to be relevant to me, and yet it's not being.
That's a missing person.
Whereas on the flip sides, in the local newspaper I got through my door, I heard a story about a man who was found dead beneath a railway track.
Oh, really?
I also saw another story a little while ago, just because these were both front page news issues, about there was like a drug bust that had gone wrong and 2 guys had been shot.
Ooh.
Like, not close to me, but in my sort of area. Now, they made news, right? But I haven't seen it. I don't interact with those people. That's not my environment to an extent. This old guy who's gone missing is, and that's not.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? That's not being.
I see what you mean.
Do you know what I mean?
It's less important.
It is, and so it's kind of like the news has become less a matter of what's relevant and what people need to know, and more a matter of almost
selectivity.
They're
very selective.
Yeah.
And that again ties into the entertainment aspect.
It is, yeah.
Because if they can have a story about a massive drug bust, obviously that's going to be more enticing to the reader than an old man who's gone missing.
Who's just gone missing.
I'm Joe Bloggs and I'm buying that paper because look, oh shit, there's been a drug bust. It's that fantasy of almost like a.
This again. I think as well, I like that you said movie fantasy because this just popped into my head just now. Maybe that's part of the reason why entertainment is becoming more important as a piece of news. So like you'll see information about celebrities on front pages and things like that because it is sexy, it's exciting to see these people. It's the same thing
right here in the Sun, Harry from One Direction, his fling with Nicole Scherzinger as an example.
Yeah, on the front page, of a national newspaper. It's like it makes I remember hearing that effective advertising. What effective advertising effectively does is it will basically make its target audience as specific as possible. That's why if you've got like you had what was it what there was a chocolate bar advert recently and it was like you're not you when you're hungry, and it was a man but it was like
Snickers.
Snickers, and it was like a you saw this chick talking being all whiny and then she was actually a man and he was hungry. Now that I found that really kind of tacky, bad taste. Played on stereotypes, played on gender roles, but that's probably an effective advert because a lot of blokes will see that and be like, oh, I'm a bloke, that's me, fuck women, or whatever, in the back of their heads, and it makes it very specific. What I guess the news almost has a similar impact now in terms of it's all about talking about these famous people and these big events as if it's gossip that you're a part of.
That's it.
It's almost they talk about these people.
There's a clash between what's actually news and what isn't. Is what you're trying to say.
Yeah, exactly it. And it's all based on making you feel special. I think going slightly changing the topic slightly as well. Moose, before before today, Moose sent me and Oggy a link for this Charlie Brooker documentary about television and how it's changed. And I thought the most interesting thing about that was how it changed from being something that was told to people to being something that was almost made by people. So the news would ask, what do you think? Send us in, what are your thoughts, what are your comments? It's almost like it's bizarre, it's almost like, we have a hand in what is news and what isn't. Which is which is a very...
Well, I mean, they're just trying to pander it to the to the watcher and listener, and again, it's about making it a business rather than rather than an informative.
I think
this is something that can affect your life.
Going back to what you said about advertising, clearly there's an attempt to make the reader feel as if they're very, very much connected to what's going on around them. Which is why we have all of these celeb front pages and so on. So there's a lot of tactics involved in what's presented as news and what isn't. But again, it comes down to the individual, and I think I have a bit of a contrary opinion in that I think the individual nowadays can really choose what it is they want to consume. Whether they want to read this stuff or not is down to them, and what sort of scope they have. Whether someone wants to read about a tsunami in Asia or Kim Kardashian is really up to them.
But like, so by that same point, like, I've been doing a lot of research on the brain recently, and like, I've learned the brain is fickle, and you see a headline and you're immediately drawn to that headline. So whether it was your choice to read it, I think there's a little bit in there that's like I had less of a choice because the advertiser knows knows who I am, knows what I can do. Now I work in advertising, and so much of it is how can you get the attention of this person in that 30 seconds of that advert.
I was going to say as well, I it's not predominantly what I do, but there is a sales element to my job as well, and a big part of that is pretty much getting somebody on board as quickly as possible. A big part of that is within a very short period of time getting saying basically what you want to do when you're selling something to somebody is you want to identify the key features of your product and get those key features into that person's brain as quickly as possible. And the idea is these have to be broad but also quite specific, so that somebody's going to be, okay, I can make use of that, okay, I can make use of that, and then you can do that again. And I agree with you. I think what you're saying, Oggy, I think is a positive product of living in the world with the internet, with mass media, where you can ultimately find out about what you want to find out about. But the flip side of that is, like what kind of Moose is saying and what I agree with, is that we're not, I don't think we're free necessarily we're not 100% free to choose what we look at, because we've got things that are pushed towards us. We've got things that are put in our faces. One thing that if you go onto any news website and you look at the comment section, particularly bizarrely with entertainment, because I was looking at a lot of articles on celebrities and famous people before this, just to kind of get an idea of what kind of people read them.
Okay.
And internet commenting is a very specific demographic of people, but the vast majority of people, almost a lot of them, seem to be like, this isn't news, why is this here? But they're still reading it, but they're still looking at it.
Yeah, exactly. They're still they're still clicking on
they're still clicking and they're still commenting, they're still putting that time in. And there's a weird I think what I've noticed a trend of mass media is, and social networking is there's a sense that nobody's actually responsible for what they do. So you get all the time, generally speaking, you get people who will say something on Twitter and then delete it and say, oh no, that's not what I meant, that's not my fault, you shouldn't get offended, blah blah blah, and do all that sort of stuff as well. And we get the same thing with the news, where there's almost a lot of journalists would probably argue they are writing stories about what we want to read, but then you've got a number of people commenting, I don't want to read this. Something like, who are you writing for and who's reading it? There's a weird, in terms of the news of today and what we read, I feel like there's a huge lack of personal responsibility. I think there's a lack of responsibility on behalf of readers to pursue and pick challenging news stories.
Why do you think that is?
I think it's simply because of, I think as a culture and as a society, we are at a point where we are, I think, just now coming to, maybe not just now, but I think over the last 10 years or so, 10, 15 years, we've been coming to terms with how much information we have.
Yeah, and that's a big point that was made by this philosopher, Alan de Botton. He said the issue, or there's a massive issue with an excess of information.
Yeah.
And what he said is that where we are, where it's no censorship has been banned.
Yeah.
There's been too much information. And he said that we've become numbed by it.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
And essentially become disinterested in what we are really interested in.
Yeah.
So we've got all this little information about things happening across the other side of the world.
Yeah.
And we just lose all ability to know what we care about.
All right. Then, I've got a question for you both then. How, if that is the case, there's no way of going back. We can't go back into a form of censorship without without compromising ourselves severely. What is a way of fixing the situation? What is a way of dealing with what is, in an ideal world, how could newspapers and the media better deliver news in a world where we've got too much of everything?
Well, for me, do you have any thoughts on this before I go into?
No, go ahead.
So for me, it's we have to change the way we deliver news, and instead of giving information about what is happening, I think we should talk about what is the result of this happening, helping people learn from this rather than being informed by it, sort of thing. I'm not sure if that's coming across legibly, but we have to. That it will have to tell us, what we can do or what could happen or what should happen. So there's a big election coming up, and it should be about what could happen as a result of this election, rather than.
I get you.
Rather than just telling us that David Cameron is winning in the polls.
I like what you're saying, because I feel like for years, I feel like this is just a general trend I've noticed in I think in what I've done in my philosophy degree, looking at trends in philosophy and ways of thinking, very much it's a very 21st century idea is the fact that we are biased, we have prejudices, and we can't escape them. For many years people thought that we could be objective, and I think the news, for many years people thought you could write a news article and just deliver, inverted brackets, the truth. I think now, you know, what I feel like what you're saying is we've got to embrace the fact that there is no one truth.
Exactly.
There are perspectives, and we have to be honest and present those perspectives as best we can. And I think that's really interesting. It's about embracing perspective and delivering perspective that people can then use, rather than, because I feel like, you know, I'm just looking at this Sun newspaper and I'm just looking at it, and there's nothing I'm really supposed to take away from this. Like some of these articles, you know, there's an article that says moment rapist carries off his victim, he's caught on CCTV, and it's got a picture of the dude doing it, and what do I do with that? I'm powerless.
Look at that. The picture is like it's blurry. It's like, okay, no one's going to know who that is, or some big bald guy. I know quite a few big bald guys. I'm going to put them. Like, what is the next step of that? What is going to happen because of that?
It's all written. It's a whole the first opening paragraph. A hulking rapist, hulking in capitals, carries a dazed woman in his arms minutes before assaulting her in a doorway in an empty street. You know, that's.
I think what we can see is that the news has become a lot more messy in comparison to previous generations, where it was strictly relating an actual, you know, news, an actual event. Nowadays, as Moose said, there's a whole element of it being linked to advertising, entertainment, and so I think for me the concept of the news is going to continue changing, and I think this is because of technology and the fact that people nowadays can just choose what it is they want to consume, and for me that's a good thing. You know, I'm against this whole idea that you have a newspaper that, you know, has the politics and the entertainment thrown in, and you read it, and you know you consume everything they want you to consume in the newspaper. You know, you can just choose yourself what it is you want to read.
And I think I really like what you're saying, actually, because I think part of the problem with the news and newspapers as a format, I think we're moving into a world with, if you look at services that are being offered, you know, you look at Netflix, you look at Spotify, you look at all these services, and what they're basically saying is, do you know what, we're not going to tell you what to do, we're going to give you the choice and you do what you want to do. That's kind of how a lot of media is moving, and I think that the news will be more successful and valuable and enjoyable and informative if it moves in that direction as well. I mean, if you look at a newspaper, part of the reason why they have to do this is functional. They need to let the reader know that, hey, if you care about crime and violence in your area, we got that. If you care about the lottery, we got that. If you care about entertainment, we got that. What it is it's they basically got to let you know very quickly if they're right for you, you know, and that doesn't necessarily have to be cynical. I think moving into what Oggy's saying, if I've got this right, is moving into the future where we've got access to so much. You won't need to vie for people's attention because people will be able to find it for themselves. They'll be able to pick for themselves. They don't, you know. You pick up a newspaper, there's a sense of mystery to it because you don't know what's going to be in the next 70 pages. You don't know.
So looking at that, it's the newspapers reacted to the instruction of the TV by becoming a bit more sensationalist. Now that we're in a digital age with people having information at the click of their fingers, what is the next step of the newspapers and then the TV? How are they going to innovate?
Yeah, how are they going to be able to keep up? You know, I think we're going to see a trend where the newspapers in particular are probably either going to become less relevant, or they're going to become more encompassing.
I see that in my job all the time. It's just a natural fact with the introduction of computers and digital. The sales of newspapers are going down tremendously.
I mean, if you take, for example, if somebody has a Twitter account and they're following whoever it is they want to follow, all of their interests are inevitably going to come back to them. So the news they want to see is going to come back to them, isn't it? So they don't have to read a newspaper that's all messy and has stuff that they don't want to read. And this for me means that news as a concept is changing quite a bit, and perhaps it's a change that we need to embrace.
Right. Nice.
Superb.
Mm.
Moving on to a very slightly different topic. I read about this test that was undertaken, I guess, in 2014, and in this test, or in this where it was, participants were found to choose stories with a negative tone, but people preferred good news. And the one way...
Almost makes you sympathetic for the news, doesn't it? This guy can't win.
The one way they looked at it, or tried to explain this, was because of the negativity bias.
Yeah.
Suggesting that we have evolved to become more interested, or we hear or remember, more efficiently, the negative news stories in order to survive, so to speak. And he found evidence that people responded quicker to negative threats. So what are your thoughts on that, or have we evolved to look at the negative things?
I think that's a really interesting idea. I think that's an extremely interesting idea. I think there's another factor to that, and I think it's the role of psychology and our awareness of psychology in modern society.
Yeah.
I think what we are in a position to do when you're in a society that can effectively produce food, produce safety, produce a safe environment for the most part for people to live in, your concerns move from simply I need to farm, I need to harvest food, and they pursue to I need to do this, and then as you gain more comfort as a society, your concerns are then going to change. They're going to become less about survival and basic instincts and more about how we live as a people. And I think that negativity bias that you're talking about is something that becomes an issue when you have the luxury of thinking, when you have the luxury to think and plan and make decisions based on nothing more than taste and what you believe is correct and morality. I think they're luxuries that come with comfort, and I think that negativity bias, it definitely will play a role in how the news is produced. It will definitely play a role in the news we choose to read. But I think the fact that people prefer positive news means that the news isn't all encompassing. It's written by people for people, and people are flawed. And something that I think we as a society need to look at is, I can't remember if I said this to you guys before, but I generally believe that the same way you go to a doctor, you go to a dentist, you should just go to a therapist. I think that should be the society we're moving in. That should be something you have to do, or you get checkups, because your psychological well-being is a factor. It wasn't 100 years ago. It wasn't 200 years ago. Because the means, the methods of delivering healthcare, the concerns of people meant that that isn't something you could focus on and make a concern, make an issue. Now we live in a world where that is an issue, and I think while that's a factor, it's something that is something we can look at and address as a society. I think negativity bias with regards to reading bad stories is something that we can challenge. And combined with positive ways of thinking, developing positive outlooks, developing optimism, and with what Oggy's saying about having the means to pick the news you want to read, I think that's something that we can overcome. And I think it's something that does dictate how we read the news, but we shouldn't let it dictate how we read the news. And I think it's something that we have the means to not let it dictate us.
So next step is getting this out there and making sure people do understand themselves a bit better.
Yeah, I think so. I think it's self-understanding. I think it's realising that what comes naturally isn't always what's best for you. Looking at negative stories, looking at bad stories, looking at scary stories about what's happening in the world or what's happening to people you know or don't know isn't always, the best thing or most important thing to do. And I think the worst thing that can happen, as a result of the news, is people lose interest. The biggest problem I think of the news is, I remember, because I'm a genius child, I remember when I was younger being like, I don't want to watch the news because it depresses me.
Yeah.
I remember making that decision, and I've never really gone back from that. I'm
I love that. As a kid, it was like, I don't want to watch the news because it depresses me.
Yeah.
Like, for me, it was, this is the most boring thing in the world.
I tell you, funny. When I was in primary school, I was in like year 6. Were
you like 47 years old in primary school?
I was. I'm a short old man. No, I was generally. I remember when 9/11 was going on. That scared the shit out of me because I didn't understand war.
Yeah.
And I thought that meant bombs were going to be dropped on Britain.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like every time,
it's a natural progression.
Every time a helicopter went over the school, I thought that was somebody going to bomb us. Like, I'm not even joking.
Ducking in the, ducking.
I was, yeah.
Hiding in the bin.
I was generally. I remember going to this other boy's house and having this bizarre conversation where we started talking about war, and he was like, I'm not going in the army, I'm too scared. I was like, I'm not going in the army either. We were like making a pact that would be conscientious objections, even though we didn't know what the fuck that meant. And I don't know, I just feel like it's the news in its current state, or at least mainstream news presentation, like in terms of what you encounter without trying. That's what I think that's what we've been talking about, just to kind of clarify terms here, because I feel like we've been talking various different forms of the news. I think the main area of news we're criticising is mainstream news. So that's the shit that when you go out, you look into, you see it on the train, you will see it on the TV, right? And I just think that stuff is so base. They have gotten themselves in a loop of they've got to outdo themselves to make it more interesting to people. They need a new story, they need a new horror story, they need something terrifying. It's not about breaking information or sharing information, it's all about outdoing each other in terms of horror and shockingness and fear and frustration, and I think that's desensitized a lot of people. I think it's made a lot of people apathetic towards what's going on in the world. And I think it's the consequence of that is, I think it kind of, I think it damages our sense of, I think it damages our sense of connection to other people. I think it damages our sense of community. I think
But yeah, no, that is a good point, because like, I'm not sure if I've got this completely wrong, but you see something in the newspaper about, this immigrant coming over to our country, and everyone that's read that newspaper is thinking, oh, these fucking immigrants.
Yeah.
That sense of community is gone, because you're seeing this and like you become they become an enemy sort of.
They do. Whatever is out there, the world becomes dangerous, scary, evil, horrible.
Yeah. When in truth, like, the only thing that's really a danger to me now, and obviously this is the benefit of living in England at the moment, is there's nothing really. I get shat on by a bird on the way to work.
Yeah. Stray dog. Stray dog takes a nibble out of your knee. Attacks you.
There's an element of the news that's just all about doom and gloom, going back to what we said earlier.
And
I think this is this sort of is linked to our sort of hyper-vigilant nature. We always want to know what's happening that could be a threat to us and so on.
They could be going back to the evolution effect.
Survival instinct, knowing what's dangerous, knowing what's.
But obviously, with the tabloid papers, they obviously manipulate that. And produce content that is obviously quite not very newsworthy and a lot more biased and so on. And that obviously has to be challenged if the news wants to continue being intellectual, should I say, and relevant.
So I think we can all sort of agree on that idea that news is beneficial. It's the wrong type of news that they're seeing.
To be honest, I think what I notice more increasingly is, I think a factor of living in a capitalist society is that the end product is ultimately making money. It's ultimately making money is the focus. Making money is the end product. But what that does is that creates a huge number of questions about life and existence and ourselves as human beings that just are not focused on or treated. I'm seeing, there's a smaller article on the Telegraph on the front page that says extremists will be treated like paedophiles, pledges Cameron. Next to that, internet and cheap flights make life better now, say grandparents. You know, it's
you can't look at those two and go, oh shit, paedophile. Oh, the story and grandparents. I'm going to be interested in both of these.
It is, yeah, and it's just so bizarre. You know, part of the reason why we do get this stuff is because there is no concern given by the Telegraph, I'm assuming, about what the impact of this newspaper is. It's more about their product. It's more about what they're offering as a project, their style as a product, what they can do as a product.
It almost becomes very selfish.
It does become. I wouldn't even go as far as saying selfish. It just becomes very automated. It becomes mechanical.
Okay.
Because the end game is ultimately, we've purchased this newspaper. This has achieved what it was supposed to achieve. Everything else is just left up to human imagination, and that's something that's not cultivated. You know, your sense of discovery, your sense of anger, your sense of fury, your sense of peace of mind from reading the news, that's not something that's factored into it for the most part. That's not something, and I think it goes back to what you were saying about how we can improve the news, of people kind of looking to teach and explain rather than just convey. Like, people are just trying to share, like with the news as it is at the moment, it's about enticing people to purchase it, and that just means there's a whole lot of bigger issues and consequences that are just not addressed by
it. Exactly.
You know, it's almost like if I just like it's like random acts of you know, just stoking people up and getting them excited and then leaving them still
building up that anger.
And it's just to get people, you know,
to buy the next newspaper.
Pretty much, yeah. And it's just that can't be, you know, that can't be the end game of a journalist. That can't be your end point. That can't be what you're trying to do. Yeah, that can't be satisfying, because then, you know, what you do is interchangeable with any other job with a bottom line. You know, it's just so bizarre. I find. I just think it's you know, fucking very, very strange. Just looking at all the different areas, all the different things the single paper is trying to tell me about the world, and
indeed,
it's just wrapped up in so many, you know. I think it's just, as I said, it's just very headless, very directionless. Nobody has a plan. You know, nobody has an end point. It's just, let's write this because it's going to be exciting and people are going to buy it, not because this is important for people to know about.
And of course, and the whole nature of selling is not about, I want someone to buy this. I want someone to keep buying this. I want someone to buy this once, and then buy it again and again and again. So, you know, they need to entice people and produce content that people do want to keep reading. But
of course,
you know, there is no learn, there is no thinking from it.
Yeah, I'll definitely agree with that. You know, I think we've talked very broadly about the news. I think we've talked kind of quite, you know, naturally, haphazardly about what's good, what we're excited about for the future, but also, you know, the problems of news of the news as it is in its current state. I think we're probably good to wrap this up shortly. Just a few closing thoughts and comments. Then, I mean, what would the news need to be like for you to read it regularly? Or what would your ideal news provider offer? Like, if you had a newspaper, or website, a show, what would be the ideal format for you?
Yeah, so that's a tough one. Yeah.
It is, yeah.
I guess it would be something that I can learn from. I will always pick up a paper if I'm learning something from it, like, you know, learn the next step or what I can do to, you know, sort of step forward from this. It will be about that. I mean, I mean, I can't really.
Yeah. I mean, if I could get all the messy stuff cut out and have the relevant information that, you know, pertains to me and is what I want to read, then, you know, I wouldn't mind. And I think it's possible that in the future, you know, the news is going to change, perhaps for the good, perhaps for the worse.
I mean, I guess that's a good way to put it, in the future, because I'm looking at it now and I'm looking at the newspapers, I'm looking at, you know, the news that's on TV, but realistically they're going to be obsolete, or newspapers particularly are going to be obsolete, and I'm going to be able to get that from the digital, from the computer. So it's about, if I'm looking at the content of digital, is it teaching me anything? I'm going back to that. Am I learning anything from that piece of content?
That's it for me. So I guess really from what you're both saying, it's all about education, and it's also about relatability
and yourself.
Relevance. I'm inclined to agree with both of you guys. I think what I generally find when I read anything, when I watch anything, when I used to buy games magazines quite a lot, and that's a form of news that was important to me.
Okay.
And what drove me in wasn't the stories so much as the team. Like, I'd get a magazine because I liked the team behind it. I liked the writers. I liked their work ethic. I liked their ethos, what they stood for, and that's what I supported. And I think, for me, that's pretty much all I need. That's pretty much all I need. I need writers and journalists who are writing with integrity and are writing about things that they care about.
Okay.
And I guess it's just for kind of looking at from what Oggy's saying, I have the feeling, for me personally, news is a positive version of the news is kind of already there. It's just I just need to find the writers who are writing what I want to read.
Wow. Okay.
And at the moment, with certain types of news, with games news, film news, that's very easy. I feel like, and ironically, as mainstream news providers have become more negative, more doom and gloom, more aggressively, terrifying, people who generally write high quality news about art, about entertainment, about games, music, films, that's actually improved. We could have spent more time talking about that. There are a number of brilliant games journalists, films journalists I read who write generally really interesting, positive
I guess that could be a
news.
topic for
Possibly could be, yeah.
I like that.
Possibly could be, yeah. But I guess it's just what I need really is just a means to finding them. Better searches, maybe better. I think possibly what we're looking at, and this is normally something I hate, but just a news hub, somewhere where you've got a collection of different people that you can find without it being tainted by advertising and upvotes and popularity. The problem with a lot of news is it's inevitably going to be swayed by the most scary and terrifying sources. If there was some sort of website, if there was some sort of model that meant I could find news that's relevant to me and that wasn't affected by views but was affected by my interests, then I'd be reading the news every day.
Well,
yeah. Alright, sounds like we've reached the end of this conversation, and let us know what you think about this. Please leave a comment. You can catch us on our Twitter, catch us on our blog as well.
Our Twitter is at the Patient Approach. And you can find our blog on thepatientapproach.blogspot.com.
Yeah, brilliant. So leave us a comment, let us know do you like the news? Do you not like the news? What would it take for you to read it more? Are you kind of leaning towards what Oggy's saying, which I'm starting to think that the news will change, but potentially changing for the better? But yeah, let us know.
And let us know about us. What can we do better? What can we do worse?
Worse?
Okay.
Moose, you did it again. You did it again. Alright. Don't let us know what we could do worse. I don't need that in my life. What
are we amazing at? How about that?
Give us constructive criticism.
Yeah,
constructive criticism. Yeah, emphasis on the constructive.
Guys.
You can't go anywhere, man. You are home. Alright, yeah, thanks for listening. We haven't decided on the next one yet, have we?
We haven't. No.
We'll let you know.
We'll let you know. Yeah, we don't want any false promises.
Stay tuned.
Yes, keep listening. All right, bye.
We love you. City's breaking down on a camel's back. They just have to go 'cause they don't know a whack. So all you feel the streets, it's appealing to see. You won't get out the country 'cause you're bad and free. You've got a new horizon, it's a femoral style. Melancholy town where we never smile. And all I wanna hear is the message beep. My dreams, they gotta kiss me 'cause I don't get sleep. No.
Yeah.
Is that alright?
That was brilliant.
That was good.
That was really